بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير، الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا، وهو العزيز الغفور، الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا، ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت، فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور، ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير، ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير، وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور، تكاد تميز من الغيظ، كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير، قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير، وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير، فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير، وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور، ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور، أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا، فستعلمون كيف نظير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون. قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين. فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون. قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم. قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين. قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها القاضم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التكي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النكي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي الأسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. حاجات. يا وسي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا حاجات حاجات. يا ساداتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله، وتوسلت بكم إلى الله، واستشفعت بكم إلى الله، فاشفعوا لي عند الله، واستنكذوني من ذنوبي عند الله، فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله، وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله، فكونوا عند الله رجائي. يا ساداتي يا أولياء الله، صلى الله عليهم أجمعين، ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالمهم من الأولين والآخرين. آمين رب العالمين. الفاتحة.
मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात। आज भी ज़ैनब की आती है सदा भाई हुसैन। आज भी ज़ैनब की आती है सदा भाई हुसैन। तेरा चेहरा तेरी आँखें फूल कब पाई हुसैन। आज भी ज़ैनब की आती है सदा भाई हुसैन। चलते लाके से गिराया खुद को जलती रेत पर घुटनियों के बल में तेरी लाश तक आई हुसैन। बस में घबराई थी खंजर तुझ पे चलता देख कर, फिर किसी मुश्किल में घिर कर मैं न घबराई हुसैन। कौन था जो मरने वालों मैं नहीं था खूबरू, भूलने बैठी तो किस किस की न याद आई हुसैन। दूर उफ्तादा सफर से के मैंने नवे ठंडा पानी जब पिया बस तेरी याद आई उसे ठंडा पानी जब पिया बस तेरी याद आई उसे आज भी ज़ैनब की आती है सदा भाई हुसैन। मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम।
Rahman ar-Rahim, Sayyid Hasan, Rizvi, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jamii wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. Dua Shfa Marys is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Ya Allah. Let us now invite Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to please come forward for tonight's Majlis. By Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When we decide that we want to respect and honor someone, when we want to venerate and to speak about the station, the maqam, and the darajah of an individual, we don't do so from our own selves. You know, a true follower of the Ahlul Bayt, they don't just go and pick out people and decide who is who in the eyes of Allah. We as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we look towards the Ahlul Bayt themselves and see who and whom have they pointed towards, whom have they venerated, whom have they elevated, and spoken about in a high fashion. And this is why we continually honor this great personality of Bibi Sayyida Fatimatul Masuma al-Qum alayha salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa For tonight, what I want to do first is to go through that point first, is to see how she has been mentioned in some of these narrations and some of the riwayat. And then what we'll see is that some of these riwayat, there's a similar message and a similar theme that we may have seen in other riwayat. And then we're going to explore that theme a little bit further, inshallah. So first and foremost, we look at the first sort of group of riwayat that we see. And I'm not going to go through everything. There are a lot of riwayat there. But I just want to break it down into sort of three categories. So the first one, the basic way that you and I have been introduced to Bibi Masuma alayhi salam is through this idea that her performing her ziyarah has tremendous value. So from her brother, our 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. We have many riwayat on this topic. So the famous one that we all know, Man zar al-ma'suma biqum kaman zarani. Right? Whoever visits and does the ziyarah of Ma'sum al-Qum is just like somebody who's done my ziyarah, which is a big statement in and of itself, right? To say that, performing the ziyarah of somebody whose title, she's been given this title of Ma'suma, but is obviously not one of the 14 Ma'sumin. To be told that, no, the ziyarah, performing the ziyarah of her is equivalent to the 8th Imam is a big deal. And then, of course, the other riwayat talk about the value, the qadr, and the thawab and ajr that come along with the ziyarah. Again, from the 8th Imam, he's reported to have said, Man zaraha falahul jannah. That if you perform her ziyarah, then Jannah becomes wajib on us. Which, again, is showing us how important and how tremendous performing her ziyarah is. So we have many riwayat from many of the members of the Ahlul Bayt in this regard, mentioning perform her ziyarah, it has this kind of value. And usually they're just kind of these one-liners, right? Very quick. We have other ones which are a bit more detailed. So this one, for example, comes from our 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And not only, and again, most of these I'm sure you've heard many times before, but this hadith, not only is it a bit more detailed, so that adds to its value, but of course, because it's coming before her time, it's getting this sort of premonition and foreshadowing value to it as well, right? So he's reported to have said, Inna lillah harama, that Allah, He has a haram, right? He has this sanctuary. وَهُوَ Makkah. Makkah is the sanctuary of Allah. Obviously, over there we're speaking about the Kaaba, for example. وَلِرُسُولِهِ harama. And of course, His Rasul, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala. His Rasul also has a haram and a sanctuary, and that وَهُوَ Medina. Medina is the city and the sanctuary of the Prophet. And it's interesting that we see it like that. Some people nowadays try to downplay the value of Medina. They say, well, the Ka'ba's in Mecca, why are we paying so much attention to Medina? So no, we're not these types where we are so, of course, this religion is a religion of Tawheed, and Mecca has its own value. But to say that we don't honor the city of Medina as some do, and I've seen some people when they go for Hajj or Umrah, they completely just, discount the value that Medina has, right? Now, this is the city of the Ahlul Bayt. This is where initially the Ahlul Bayt are being welcomed, right? So we have to make sure that we're giving it its due status. The hadith continues, وَلِي أَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلِيَ بْنَ أَبِي طَالِبٍ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Harama. So he has a haram and a sanctuary as well. وَهُوَ الْكُوفَةِ. His is, of course, in Kufa. Then Imam says, Imam Sadiq, وَلَنَا حَرَمًا. And we, meaning the rest of the Ahlul Bayt, we also have our own haram and sanctuary as well. وَهُوَ قُم. Qum is our sanctuary. وَسَتُدْفَنُ فِيهِ إِمْرَأَ مِنْ وُلْدِ. That someone, a lady, a woman from us, shall be in the future buried there. تُسَمَّ Fatima, and she'll be named Fatima. مَنْ زَارَهَا وَجِبَتْ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Right? So whoever visits her, Jannah will be wajib on them. So It's mentioning the same exact point at the end that you perform her ziyarah, you get Jannah. But it's offering, a bit more detail there. It's giving, this is a future premonition as well. There's discussions about the authenticity, which I'll leave aside for now. Again, this is something famous that many ulama have narrated. But I just want to go through the different types of riwayat that are there. Now, the final one, and this is the one that I want to spend some time focusing on for tonight, inshallah. This is that theme that we see is all throughout many other riwayat as well, especially when it comes to the idea and concept of ziyarah itself. This one again is coming from Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. And this is in response to somebody who's heard all of these other riwayat before. They've heard that, Jannah is wajib and, she has this status and this status. So maybe they were a bit kind of confused that, why would this random, forgive me, but why would this random woman or daughter of the seventh Imam, why would she have such value? Why would just the sister of the Imam have such value? We don't have this for every single other family member of the Ahlul Bayt. So some might be thinking, some of the Ahlul Bayt or some of the Shia might be thinking, why her? What's going on here? So as he's in conversation and asking, I've heard this hadith, Ibn Rasulullah, that I get Jannah, what's going on? And the eighth Imam responds, he says, Na'am. He said, yes, meaning what you've heard is correct. Man zaraha arifan bihaqqiha falahul Jannah. So whoever performs a ziyarah, but has ma'rifah of her haqq, of her reality, on her station, that person deserves Jannah. That person will get Jannah. So now this last grouping of riwayat is not just generally telling us that you get Jannah for visiting her. It's not just saying that she has this great status in maqam. What it's saying is that if you want that wajib Jannah upon you from performing ziyarah, the shart and the condition is that we have to have ma'rifah of her actual value in her station. What haqq she has, especially in the eyes of Allah. Now, we have seen this before, right? This comes in many riwayat, especially when we think about Imam Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. And many of you have heard it before, so I don't need to go through it. You've heard it many times. That you have general riwayat which mention visit the Imam, you got this many rewards, you get Jannah, XYZ. And then some other ones come and they have shara'it and shurut, they're conditional. They say, arifan bi haqq. You have to have ma'rifah of their haqq. And this comes from many of the members of the Ahlul Bayt. Even there are some riwayat which talk about the abilities and the powers of khaq shifa, right? The turbatul Hussein, which they say can heal everything except for death, right? We've seen the narrations, I'm sure you know that. Other riwayat mention, yes, but a person has to have the ma'rifah of that turba as well. So a lot of riwayat, because some people say, how is it so easy that we can all get Jannah like this? Many people perform ziyarah. Well, you're right. That these grand rewards don't just come to anybody for any reason. They come when there's a higher level and a real level of ma'rifah about that individual. So what we want to try to, inshallah, is to see, what does it really mean to have ma'rifah of somebody, and particularly of Bibi Masuma? What does that really mean to have ma'rifah of them? And particularly, we're trying to figure this out when we're performing somebody's ziyarah. So that will be our discussion for tonight. If you can recite another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first mistake that some of us make is when we confuse ilm and ma'rifah. Most of us, I don't think we do that, right? Because we know that between ilm, knowledge, and ma'rifah, a deep recognition or understanding, however we want to translate it, we know conceptually there's a difference, right? So I know that there's a difference between ilm and ma'rifah, sure. But when we try to figure out what exactly ma'rifah is, we confuse that with ilm. Let me give an example. What we end up thinking having ma'rifah of a member of the Ahlul Bayt is that, I have information. I know the date of their wilada. I know the date of their shahada. I know all of their alqab, their laqab, their kunya. I know their titles, their names. Like for her, I know that she's also Karimatul Ahlul Bayt. I know this title of hers. I know birthplace. I know where they have been poisoned, what kind of poison, who did the poisoning, how they were attacked. Example for her. I know that the place where she was allegedly poisoned or attacked was different than, where she was eventually buried. I know that. Those of us who may have gone to Qom and performed the various places of ziyarah know that there is an ibadat gah, a place where she performed her ibadat in her last, moments or days or weeks of her life, called Baytun Nur, for example. It's like, okay, I know this information. I know the route that she took when she left Medina and went to go try to eventually see her brother. It's like, I know this one. I know about the history of the construction of the haram of Bibi Masuma. So a lot of people have a lot of this information, which, alhamdulillah, that's great. But is that ma'rifah? To have this sort of, again, like detailed XYZ, trivia information. Okay, that's good, but that's good for a tour guide, right? If you want to take somebody on a Ziyarat group, right, take them for a trip, you want to give them all the details, it's wonderful. You want to write an encyclopedia, write a book or an article, that information is helpful, definitely. You want to get 4 out of 4 on a Slido quiz or whatever, then yeah, that information is going to help you. But when we're talking about ma'rifah of a personality, that information is just the bare minimum. And it may not even be helpful in certain instances as well. Let me go a bit forward. We are commemorating it tonight on the 4th of Rabi-ul-Awwal. And there's various reasons why this date has been chosen by certain centers or communities. Not every center or community commemorates it on this night. Others have picked a date in Rabi'-ul Thani, right? I think it's the 9th or 10th that some commemorated on. But most of our ulama, even contemporary maraji, like Ayatollah Sayyid Shubayri Zanjani, hafadhahullah, he says that, look, all of these dates about her wilada, about her shahada, I'm talking about Bibi Masuma specifically, they say it's not just that we got it wrong, it's that where we started getting it from the beginning, it's actually forged. Somebody made this up initially. Now, why they did this, I don't know. Because of the Ziyarat industrial complex, I don't know. You can figure that out, like tourism industry, I don't know. But they say, look, this is clear fabrication. Somebody had made this up. They have the whole stories about how this came up as well, too. That's not our main concern. What I'm saying is that this information, especially for Bibi Masuma, that can't be enough for her ma'rifah, especially if our own maraji' or ulama are saying that this information is forged and made up. And it's very tough to figure out these details. So how could gaining information, superficial trivia information, be called gaining ma'rifah of an individual? So there's got to be something different. So let's look at another possibility after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Some of us might say, no, it's not about birthday and wilada, shahada, and this geographical information and simple tariq. My information, what I have, which I claim gives me ma'rifah, is that I know about her connection to the Ahlul Bayt. I know her father, as of course the 7th Imam, brother being the 8th Imam, right? I know this information. Or they might say, I know the dhulm that was done to her, the oppression that was done to her. Like, this is what I know. And that is my connection to her. It's like, okay, well, the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt had the same information as well too, didn't they? And they know this for not just her, but for many of the members of the Ahlul Bayt. I know technically the ayam of Aza are technically finished, but let's just go back, a month or 2 months back. The enemies of Imam Husseini alayhi salam in front of him in the battlefield, the Imam is telling him, don't you know my grandfather? Don't you know my noble lineage? Don't you know my mother? Don't you know my uncles? XYZ. And the enemies say, yes, we know exactly your line. We know your lineage. We know your ancestors. We know your maqam and station as well too. We know all of that. But because of our hatred for your father, Ali ibn Abi Talib, we're going to come and kill you. Right? So simple, even genealogical information is also not enough. Knowing that they have some status with Allah also may not be enough for somebody's ma'rifah too. Right? So okay, that's not enough. Now this idea of dhulm and oppression, like okay, well that information, we're commemorating this tonight. We know that there is, even if it's vague, we have some information. She tried to go and visit Imam Rida, meet up with her brother, and she was attacked or poisoned somewhere just outside of Qom. We have this information as well too. So look, because I know she's mazluma, she was an oppressed person, that gives me the right to say I have ma'rifah of her. So even there, is that really ma'rifah too? Because this is very similar to the way that we have knowledge of the other members of the Ahlul Bayt too. Most of us could probably say, I know that, generally speaking, all of the ma'asumeen, right? All of the imams at least were poisoned or attacked or became shaheed in some way, right? Like, okay, so I have this information. Most of us can probably maybe even name which khalifa, false khalifa did this too. So a lot of us have that information. Many of you could probably mention the details of the last moments, meaning the masa'ib of that specific member of the Ahlul Bayt too. So a lot of us have that information. So is that ma'rifah? This was something that was on the mind of many individuals. And one of our famous ulama, Ayatollah Sayyid Hadi Khusro Shahi, marhum, he passed away about 3 years ago. One of the first of our ulama in Qom who had passed away due to COVID, actually. So he's somebody that if you look into the books of Ayatollah Bahjat, Qaddasallahu Sirru, he reports a lot of stories from Ayatollah Bahjat. So he was somebody who was constantly going to Ayatollah Bahjat for advice. So he narrates this story himself, Ayatollah Khusro Shahi. He says that once a group of my friends and I were going to perform the ziyarah of our 8th Imam, Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, before we decided to go to Mashhad and visit the Imam, we first went to Ayatollah Bahjat. And we wanted to get some advice. And we specifically asked him about the different adab of ziyarah. What are the adab, right? The etiquettes, the different, the better or best practices of ziyarah. So they said that Ayatollah Bahjat, when he heard the question, he paused for a bit, which was actually something that was, again, Ayatollah Khusro Shahi himself reports that Ayatollah Bahjat was a person who was not in the habit of just giving replies very quickly. He would take time and reflect and then give a response. So he paused. He said, after a while, Ayatollah Bahjat responded to us and said that the most important adab of ziyarah is to know that there is no difference between the life of the Ma'asumeen alayhimus salam and their death. And that's all he said. That there is no difference between their life and their death. And so, now Ayatollah Khusro Shahi is like, that's all he said. He didn't say anything else. And they knew better than to kind of push Ayatollah Bahjat after that. They knew that, okay, I have to reflect on this. So they went and they tried to reflect on, perhaps what is this? They came to their own conclusions. He narrates himself. He said that the most important adab of ziyarah has to be summed up in this sentence. Now, it doesn't really leave us with much though. Perhaps it has to do with the point that we just made though, that knowing the last moments of a member of the Ahlul Bayt or a prophet may not be enough. Many of us know the last few moments, but even now, a lot of us say, whenever we, a shab of the commemoration, whether it's a wilada or shahada, of one of the members of the Ahlul Bayt or the family of Rasulullah comes, a lot of people now are in the habit of saying, look, we don't want the same stuff that we've heard over and over again. Give us some new stories, give us some new information, something we're not, a hadith we haven't heard, or some event in their life that we don't know about. So many people, I think we all realize that we've been hearing the same information over and over again. So I think that information, which is usually what? The information towards the end of their life, that's usually what we have, especially for many of the later imams. All we have is their end information, not the beginning life information, right? So a lot of people, now perhaps this is one of the secrets that Ayatollah Bahjat is saying, is that there shouldn't be a difference when we're looking at their lives and their deaths. If all I know about is their death, then it means I've missed a great portion of their life. How can I have ma'rifah of that individual? If all I know is the dhulm and the oppression that was done towards the end of their life that led to their shahada at the end. And then specifically about this point, right, where we're supposed to have ma'rifah and ziyarah, he said this separately because Ayatollah Khusro Shahi asked him separately, tell me about this idea where I have to have ma'rifah of Bibi Masuma, that I have to have ma'rifah before I can do her ziyarah. Like, what does that mean? And he mentioned this line. He said that her maqam is lower than the ma'asumeen, but higher than everybody else. And we're like, what does this even mean? Her maqam is lower than the ma'asumeen. Okay, we can understand that, but higher than everybody else. I mean, look, it sounds nice from the minbar. It sounds nice if somebody, kind of motivates you for performing the ziyarah, but how do I, actually practically adapt it? What do I do with information like that? So over here now, we want to go a bit deeper and look at some of the statements about this from Ayatollah Jawadi Amli, hafidhullah, after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So what do we have so far? We went through the riwayat. We realized that to get Jannah for this ziyarah, right? Jannah's wajib if we do the ziyarah. The condition mentioned by the Ahlul Bayt is that we have to be arifan bihaqqiha, have ma'rifah of her maqam, her station, her value, the right that she has. Okay. Now what does that mean? It can't just be simple information. It's not just something that's easily accessible. It's got to be something deep. We recognize that. So it can't just be basic bio data or things about the end of her life. There's got to be something more there. Ayatollah Bahjat has left basic information too, which seems deep, but it's maybe not giving us enough, right? That our idea about a ma'asum's life and death needs to be similar or equal, we would say, right? We have to have more information about their lives and understand what does it mean to say that somebody's maqam is lower than the ma'asumeen, but higher than everybody else. So some points I want to share from Ayatollah Jawadi Amli. The first one is this, as a kind of disclaimer that he gives. He says, look, we also want to make sure that when we see these types of riwayat that mention that a shart of gaining Jannah or these types of rewards from ziyarah or whatever types of hadith it is, whatever ibadah that happens to be, he says, look, when it says that, then you get Jannah if you perform it with XYZ conditions and Shahadat, he says, don't be discouraged either. He says, if a person just goes, has zero ma'rifah whatsoever, or we'll say 0.01%, meaning all they have is the bio data information, just the basic stuff. They don't know anything about the personality until they go for ziyarah, and that tour guide or the alim or whoever's there, says that, oh, this is what happened in this year, and here's the route, and here's the history. Maybe that's the most somebody has. He says, that's fine. You still get thawab and ajr in proportion to the information you have. He's like, don't worry about that. He says, what we're talking about over here is that a person's ma'rifah, and however much higher it goes for the individual, especially somebody like Bibi Masuma, that's when the amount of ajr and reward and thawab increases then in proportion. It's like, that's what we're talking about over here. So don't just toss away and say, well, because I don't have full ma'rifah, I'm not going to do ziyarah. He says, no, do ziyarah no matter what level you're at, no matter what it is, even from far away. Do that ziyarah, perform it, recite it. Even if you're in person, you don't have full information, that's okay. But if a person is looking for that highest level possible to get that kamal and perfection of the ziyarah, then that's when they should gain more ma'rifah there. So that's his first sort of disclaimer. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now the second is basically, he says the key to understanding what is this idea of ma'rifah in the first place, especially when it comes to Bibi Masuma. He says the sort of key we can gather here is found within the lines of her ziyarah, very simply. Allah doesn't seem to hide everything. He puts it right in plain view. We can find it there. So in the ziyarah, and that's coming from the Ahlul Bayt, most of you have read it. It's not a very long ziyarah necessarily, but most of the beginning part is very similar to ziyarah waritha, right? It's sending salams to various previous of the Anbiya and Mursaleen, previous prophets, all the members, all the Ma'asumeen, the Ahlul Bayt. Then that's after all of this is done, this is when she is now being addressed, right? And when it comes to one part, we address her, right, as we perform the ziyarah of her, and we say, Ya Fatima, ishfa'ili fil Jannah. So, Ya Fatima, Fatima al-Masuma, perform my shafa'ah, do shafa'ah for me in Jannah. فَإِنَّ لَكِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ شَأْنًا مِنَ الشَّأْنِ. Because without a doubt, you have this sha'n, you have this manifestation, you have this maqam, you have this special ability that is with Allah, that only Allah understands and knows. So now, he says, this is the key that we have to understand over here. And this key comes in the concept of shafa'ah. Shafa'ah, look, I don't want to go through a whole lecture of shafa'ah, number one, because I don't have time. Number two, hopefully you've already heard enough about shafa'ah. I have to just give you at least the basic disclaimer sort of point. What is shafa'ah? Remember, shafa'ah is different than tawassul, right? Tawassul has its own set of controversies, obviously, but shafa'ah should be uncontroversial and non-controversial for us. For Sunni Shia, there should be no controversy whatsoever. Shafa'ah comes from the word shaf'. Shaf' just means having a close connection and attachment. In a sense, it actually means literally being paired with somebody, being paired with something. Shaf' is actually the opposite of witr and watr. The same, numerically, you have evens and odds, right? Even numbers and odd numbers. That's how it's also used in Arabic. Shaf means even or even numbers or even things, and witr or watr means odd. So that last one rak'ah salah of namaz al-shab is what? Salatul what? Witr. Why? Because it's an odd number salah. And we have this in many narrations, right? Witr sometimes just means being odd or odd numbered. Shaf means being even, right? Having this similarity, this close connection, this attachment, being paired, evenly keeled with somebody. Now, again, the deep analysis sometimes of the Arabic should be enough for us. I think you should understand what it means then to have ma'rifah of somebody. But let's go a little bit deeper than that. We know Allah is the true shafi' as well. That He is the shafi' and He grants idhn and permission to whomever He wants to. He can make Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa and the other ma'asumeen, He can give them the power of shafa'ah too, which He has done, obviously. That's why most, if not all, even Sunnis accept this fact, that shafa'ah after death, for example, now when it happens to life, that's where there's slight disagreement, but at least after death, everybody accepts, no, something else is going to happen over there. And what does that mean? Does that just mean that a person with some vague notion of Islam and some vague level of practice, they show up on the day of judgment says, hey, Rasulullah, remember me? I said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Now take me to the highest level of Jannah. And is that our expectation? Well, it shouldn't be, and I think you all know why. And we have many riwayat which tell us why that can't be the case. The famous one from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam. He's reported to have said, لَن تَنَالُوا شَفَاعَتَنَا مَنْ اسْتَخَفَّ بِالصَّلَاةِ. That our shafa'ah will never come to anybody who does istighfaf or gives takhfif to their salah. Meaning what? Takhfif, if you know in other languages, in Farsi and Arabi, even contemporarily, takhfif, making something khafif is what? Lightening it. Right? Even now, you go to the bazaar, talk about takhfif. What does that mean? It's a discount, right? And you want to get a better deal, ask for a takhfif, you want a discount. Meaning lower the value of it. Imam is here saying, look, our shafa'ah is not completely in our hands. We don't just give it out to whoever we want. Allah has given us the permission. That's why we can do it. But it's also for us too, as Muslims and mu'mineen. He says, if you take your salah lightly, our shafa'ah will never touch you. It'll never come towards you. Meaning, if we now take this concept before, shafa'ah has to do with this idea of pairing, being on the same level as somebody. If somebody has this great love and muhabbat for the ma'asumeen and Allah, that's great, wonderful. If they devalue and lighten the level of salah, then there's no way they can have true ma'arif of the Ahlul Bayt. It's impossible. There's no way they can be a shafi' and a pairing and an even person along with the Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because they don't have, and you and I won't have the same value systems as they do. If for them, awwal al-waqt, waqt al-fadila, adding in mustahabat, all of these things have value, but we just don't care. We just try to get it done, barely try to finish it before it becomes qada, then that's clearly not, we're not on pair, we're not even in the same wavelength or thinking patterns as the Ahlul Bayt. It's not going to happen. This idea of shafa'ah is that, look, if you try your best to be at our level, to become a pair with us, to become at the same, wherever you can, the same mindset as us, have the same moral values, akhlaq, philosophy, aqidah, you work towards that, then we can do shafa'ah of you. I can say, yo, Allah, this person in the dunya, they tried to earn the same maqam and status as we had. They used us as role models. They valued salah, they valued akhlaq, they valued relationships with fellow mu'mineen and mu'minat, they had respect for their parents, they did what they could for their children, XYZ. All this stuff, which is part of the Islamic holistic system, they did all this. That means that they're one of us. So if they're one of us, then our shafa'ah can come to them and that their station now can be risen and they can go higher and higher. So what we have in riwayat then is that one of the values of this is that, look, we all know that anybody who has wilayah, eventually they'll end up in Jannah. We have that. But that doesn't guarantee that you and I will have this shafa'ah, an equivalent station with the ma'asumeen. You and I have a choice. We could be those of us who have this great honor and veneration for somebody like Abu Fadl Abbas. We can say that, like, yes, I love Abbas, I love Ali al-Akbar, I love Qasim, I love the Ahlul Bayt, I love all these companions. Like, okay. And maybe, based on the basic wajibat and basic things we do, Allah uses this overarching Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Rahmah, and we end up in Jannah. But it might be that bare level 1 Jannah, which is probably so better than most of us, I'd say, deserve. But how many of us would feel ashamed and feel unprivileged and feel guilty when we look up, spiritually speaking, metaphysically speaking, and see that there were some individuals, because they had the wafa of Abu Fadl Abbas, they had the aqidah of Ali al-Akbar, they worked towards the aqidah and the akhlaq and the station of the Ahlul Bayt. They tried their best to do that, so that's why they are in that same level and maqam with them. They have a palace next to Bibi Fatima. They're there able to serve it and offer salah alongside the Ahlul Bayt. Like that should be our goal, level 7, not level 1. That should be the goal there. And to be that means we require that shafa'ah. So a lot of ulama say the shafa'ah for the actual followers of the Ahlul Bayt or the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt is not simply to get into Jannah. He said, look, don't look for that. Look for your station to be risen, to be elevated, to say that, look, this person, they were trying. They had the same value system as us. They honored us. When we were sad, when we had gham, they had gham. When we had sa'ada and happiness and farha, we did the same thing too. They were happy with us. So give them that shafa'ah Allah and rise them to our station as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, Ayatollah Jawadi is saying, look, this idea of shafa'ah, this station that she has, this is actually the key to understanding, having ma'rifah of her. Is that if we recognize the akhlaq, the values that she had, the connection to her brother, the connection to her father, the connection to all the other brothers, the distance, the tabarri that she was performing to the enemies, right? The Abbasids, what she was doing, how she was speaking. If we have all of that information, again, not just basic historical info, but that becomes a specific role model for us. She's a role model for us, and that we try to act on that. So that's what it means to have ma'rifah of somebody. That I'm using that value system, and I want to have that exact same value system. And that's why he's using this line from her Ziyarat, that I'm asking Sayyidah Fatima to Masuma, perform my shafa'ah in Jannah. Meaning, I'm going to be in Jannah, but I want to raise to what maqam and station that you have, because you might be just one station under the Ma'asumeen, as Ayatollah Bahjat said, but you've been raised to the status with them in Jannah because of what you had tried to achieve. Because you are constantly there and connected with the system of wilayah. Now, if you and I are trying to do the same thing, then yeah, we'll get that as well too. Now, we might say, okay, but what exactly does that mean? What are the sort of answers to this, like these deep secrets and mysteries of her ma'rifah? And that is actually the problem and solution at the same time. Is if I were to give everything to you, of everything she said, everything she had done, the secrets behind her relationship with her brother and her father and all of this, it would actually devalue it completely. Why? Because then I would have done all the work for you. And there would have been no zahmat on your part. If there's no zahmat on your part, then you haven't actually done the work that she's done. Again, being shafir means that we don't get the spoon-fed version of Islam. We don't get the spoon-fed version of ma'rifah. If I tell you all the information, that, oh, these are her secrets, you and I will take it in. I can read a history book too. I can read this value, what Ayatollah Jawadi and Ayatollah Bahjat are saying. I can do that same thing too. But for me to apply that is a whole different thing. That's up to me. Islam is not a religion where we just have blind faith and blind belief and that's it. We're done now. Right? We're not like these other religions. We're also not a religion where we're pay to play. Right? Other religions, yeah, you can pay your way into gaining higher levels in Jannah. Although some Muslims now are doing the same thing. They've set up paywalls to get higher information, but it's different. No, our religion, our deen, the religion of the Ahlul Bayt is one where you put in effort, you put in work. However much you put in, that's the ma'rifah you and I get. That's the idea. If I give it to you, or rather the same thing, I'll have to quote Dr. Strange over here, as he told Iron Man in Endgame. It's like, if I tell you, it won't happen. If I tell you what ma'rifah actually looks like, and I give you every single little detail, it won't be ma'rifah for you because you haven't put in the work. If I just ask one of my teachers in Qom, hey, give me all the secrets about Bibi Masuma, he'll do that. If he does, it's not real ma'rifah for me either, because I'll have just been spoon-fed with the information. It's up to you and I to see, push my capability, my capacity a little bit more. Read a bit more, study a bit more, go out of my way, right? This is, when we have these sort of gatherings, the idea is that they're supposed to act as a launch pad and a platform, right? A catalyst for us to achieve higher things. This is not supposed to be literally the end game and the be all and end all. This is for us to be re-motivated, reinvigorated, the same way when you actually go and perform the Ziyarat in the first place. As many do. They go perform Ziyarat of Arba'een and Ashura. They go on off season, whenever it is. Everybody says, yes, I got recharged. Okay, but that wasn't it. Just the Ziyarat in and of itself was not enough. And perhaps this is why the Ahlul Bayt have said, if you have the ma'rifah of her haqq and her station, then Jannah will be wajib for you. Well, why will it be wajib? Because you have already understood her value, the mysteries and the secrets, so you'll have been acting upon them. Your thinking patterns will be just like hers. Because her thinking pattern was no different than her brother's and her father's, just like the Ahlul Bayt. Our behavior, the way that we speak, our insistence on following the ahkam to the T, will be no different than her, because she's no different than the rest of the Ahlul Bayt. If we follow this line of wilayah, then it makes sense why Jannah would be wajib for somebody like that. It shouldn't be such a great mystery. And when we think about this idea of being a shafi' and being paired alongside with the Ahlul Bayt, and how she was also, of course, been given the shafa'ah from her own brother and her father and all the members of the Ahlul Bayt, one of the other ways we see how shafa'ah is performed is in musibah, masa'ib, and gham and bala as well. And that's why you see these same themes even in the masa'ib of the Ahlul Bayt. Even though they may not have gone out into the battlefield, you see the similarities in the masa'ib that they have as well too. They say from a young age. Bibi Masuma, the way that shafa'ah in a sense was performed for her was that she was able to share in the gham, the musibah and masa'ib of another young girl who had lost connections with her own brothers and father. Just like Bibi Sakina, we see Bibi Masuma as well. Bibi Masuma is there, only a few years old. A few years old, she has this deep connection with Imam al-Kadhim. But she then has to lose this. She loses her father at a young age. Of course, the difference is Bibi Sakina, she's able to send her final salams and say farewell and to sleep on the chest of her father before she bids him farewell and al-wida. Bibi Masuma, the musibah for her, I would say, is even greater. Because at this young age, she still had some hopes in her heart that her father might return one day. So, 5, 6 years old, they say that the workers in her house say that we would find her outside sleeping in the garden. And we'd come out and ask her, why are you sleeping like this? She says, I'm waiting for my Baba to come back. I'm waiting for the day that he comes back so I can be the first one to greet him, to give him a hug and say salam to him. I want to see him first. They say year after year, she'd be sleeping outside waiting for him to come back. Until one tragic day, somebody comes back, she thinks it may be her father, and she opens it, and she finds that it's a messenger. And the messenger relays the information to the Ahlul Bayt and tells Bibi Masuma, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridan biqada'ihi wa tasliman li amri. Your father has passed. And if it wasn't difficult enough to find out that her father has passed on like this, now she has to go and find out that her father is not given a proper burial. Her father is now rolled up in a piece on a carpet and put on a bridge for all to see. She has to be told that these mal'oon individuals sat down and suffocated the imam in this stage. This is the dhulm, this is the musibah that Bibi Masuma has to hear. And then beyond that, we see how she is separated and taken away from her brother, just like Zainab is taken away from Imam Hussein, just like Zainab is taken away from Abbas. But the difference again over here is that Zainab is able to say al-wida, a final salam to Abbas, a final salam to Hussein. But we see Bibi Masuma, she tries her best to go and meet with her brother. She tries to make this journey there, but she's poisoned outside of Qum. She's poisoned there, she's attacked there in her caravan, surrounded by her brothers. She's there and she's buried in Qum. She's surrounded by people who are those who are supporters. The one musibah that she did not have to face, that Zainab did have to face, is that Zainab is not surrounded by those who are supporters and lovers. Zainab is being taken in the bazaar of Sham, having garbage thrown on her, having non-mahram look at her and throw boiling water on top of her head. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. शहीद करबला है दीन की बका सभी है नैनवा हुसैन बादशाह शहीद करबला है दीन की बका सभी है नैनवा हुसैन बादशाह हशर में रंग लाएगा कौने शहीदा देखना हशर में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना आएंगी जब फातिमा आएगी जब फातिमा हाले परेशान देखना हशर में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना हशर में रंग लाएगा उन्हें शहीदा देखना रूबरू बाबा के जब खातूने जन्नत आएंगी काली जोली सरीवरे कानैन को दिखलाएंगी फिर यकी कहलाएगा फिर यकी कहलाएगा कलेजा चीर के रुख बदल डाले उम्मत ने तेरी तस्वीर के मालिक कौसर ज़रा मालिक कौसर ज़रा उम्मत के एहसान देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना असगरे मासूम के लब पर सवाल अब है बूंद पानी के लिए वो किस कदर बेताब है नहर से पानी नहीं नहर से पानी नहीं देते मुसलमान देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना ज़ैनबा कुलसूम से कहता तशम्रे बदगहर शाम में जाओगे नंगे सर पे रोगी दर बदर करबला के बाद अब करबला के बाद अब तारे के जिंदा देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना कंबला गुलजार का इस दिल को रोज हश्र का जो है औलादे पैगंबर की मोहब्बत से बारात बख्शवा देंगे उसे बख्शवा देंगे उसे यसरब के सुल्तान देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना आएगी जब फातिमा आएगी जब फातिमा हाले परेशान देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीदा देखना हश्र में रंग लाएगा खूने शहीद पर मोहम्मद वाल मोहम्मद सलवात
Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alaikum ya Fatima al-Zahra Sayyidati Nisa'il Alameen. Assalamu alaikum ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu alaikum ya Hussein al-Shahid Karbala. Assalamu alaikum ya Ali ibn al-Hussein wa Muhammad ibn Ali wa Ja'far ibn Muhammad وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الحجة القائم المهدي وجهك على عبادك ومنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا قابة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا ما من الإنس والجان. عجل الله فرجك وسخر الله مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.